Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel and blog. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card making tutorial. Today I'd like to share a card that I created with cracked glass technique. I'm stamping with Best Birds stamp set, and I'm going to use a layering oval to make a cutout frame for the front of the card. To do a simple masking, I have pre-stamped on a piece of copy paper and fussy cut a bird. I want the bird to be frontmost around other stamping, so I'm going to start off with the bird and just lay that simple fussy cut bird on top of the stamped image. Now I'm going to be able to make a background for the bird, and once the piece of paper is removed, the image of the bird is protected by the mask. I keep this mask in my stamp set, that way I can use it for many different purposes. I'm using brown tones today to do all of my stamping, and except for I wanted this to have a brown and blue look. That's my favorite color combination. So I'm using some Pool Party ink to go around the bird, and I grabbed a sponge dauber that I've used with my blue before. However, as you can see, there's not a lot of blue coming off of this sponge dauber. It appears that this dauber must have gotten up against or put in with some yellow, and so the color on top of the dauber has turned green. Now I have a new color combination of brown and green. I'm happy with it, but it's not what I started out to be. So this is just one example of making lemons out of lemonade. I've gotten a clean dauber for the bird, and I'm using just the same color that the bird was stamped in and making a little bit of a vintage look. I want this technique to come off as vintage, but I'm still working with clean and simple. I'm using the heat gun on my stamps and sponging to make sure everything's completely dry, and now we're going to start the cracked glass portion. First, I need to use the Versamark ink pad and completely cover the card front with loads of Versamark. I want the I want the clear sticky embossing powder to stick to all of the Versamark all over everywhere. This is going to be heat set many different times with many different layers of the embossing powder. It's going to build up layers upon layers. Instead of just making a raised shiny area, this is going to be a very glassy, vintage looking image. The way that I achieve that with my Stampin' Up! Products is to keep layering all of the embossing powder on top of more and more Versamark. So the order that it's going to go is Versamark on the paper, apply embossing powder, and heat set. Then put more Versamark, embossing powder, then heat set. This is going to happen many different times. Many different layers are going to be applied in order to build up enough embossing powder to get a thick enough coat that I can crack and get those broken glass looking lines coming into the project. I'm not going to mislead you that this does not use up a lot of embossing powder, because it does. However, I think it works out for the technique. It is worth it because the final product is really beautiful, and it is something that I think is very unusual for someone to receive a card that has an inlay of something that looks more like a found object or found piece of art. It's going to make a very special card. So I'm adding so many layers of this Versamark, then embossing powder, then heat setting. And I'm going to then place it in the freezer to make sure that all of this stuff freezes up really nicely before I try to crack the embossed image. Now 5 minutes in the freezer. Okay, now we're going to try to do the crack. Are you going to come watch me? Okay. Oh, it didn't crack. I think we need to add some more embossing. Yep, it's not hard enough yet, so we need some more layers. Let's keep trying. Wasn't that exciting hearing that crack? So I had to end up putting up to 11 layers. I know that's a lot, but 11 layers of embossing is what it took for me to get it. And this is with standard clear embossing powder. So now I'm going to use the same brown sponge dauber and the same brown ink and put a light coat over the top, and I'm focusing on those areas that have the cracks. So the object is to get some of the brown ink down into the cracked portion of the embossing to make it appear as if this is a very old piece of vintage glass art. I'm using a facial tissue to remove some of the extra part because the image I want is going to be smooth and all of that dark vintage part is soaked into the cracks and not laying on the top. I hope that makes sense. So I now have my die cut oval frame, and I'm going to adhere my vintage panel down to the card base, and everything is made with thick whisper white today, including the image that I stamped. And I'm going to raise up the image, I'm going to raise up the oval, and I will adhere everything down with fast fuse, because fast fuse is a stronger adhesive than snail. Now, the reason I was holding the oval over the image is I wanted to make sure before I added the image to the card base that it was placed in exactly the right place in the window of the frame. Inside the card, I'm putting another bird, and it looks like I got a little messy on my stamping. So I'm getting one of the images from the best birds and adding a stamped image over where I put a fingerprint, and it's going to hide it and nobody will know what it was. It's just a pretty little flower. I'm adhering this down to the inside of the card, and here you see the finished product. This is a vintage styled card in a clean and simple look, and I made this card for a very special person that is in need of some encouragement to battle health issues. So thank you guys for joining me for another tutorial. I invite you over to my blog at jennystampsup for more inspiration. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching the video. See you next time.